Welcome to CCH Guitar Studio. I'm your host, Chad. We are continuing with the series of taking your song from conception all the way to its final release. Now in this episode, we're going to talk about how I lay down the drums. The drums I use are the EZdrummer by Toontracks. Now if you're looking for a free version out there for a drum kit, there's two that I do recommend. One is the MT Power Drum Kit 2, and the second one would be the Steven Slate Drum Kit. They both sound really good. I'll play those later on in the video for you because I do have both of them, and you can hear what they sound like. If you're recording acoustic drums, if you're using like 5 to 8 different mics, that's how many inputs you're going to have on your audio interface, so just remember that. Alright, before we get started on the computer, there's one thing I do recommend. If you're not a drummer, I would at least talk to a drummer or study how a drummer would play a certain piece of music. The better understanding you have on how a drummer would play something, the more realistically you can program your drums. So let's go over the computer and I'll show you how this all works. Okay, now we're over at the computer here. I have a session open from the previous video that we did on organization. We created a demo. I laid down two guitar tracks, and I just over a drum pattern. That's all I did. And right now, the only thing I did was I deleted the drum track that was already in there because we're going to put our own drums into it. Now, the way I like to work with the kick drum first, and I always do a pattern of 2 measures. The reason for that is because sometimes in a particular song, the first track is a little bit different from the second track. But in this case, when we do it, both measures are going to be the same, so there's really no, you can work in one measure if you really wanted to. It just all what you prefer. I always like to do 2, so that's what I'm going to end up doing. Let's open up the piano roll view. If you're using a different type of DAW other than Cakewalk, you want to find the place where you can manually input all your MIDI notes. So on my DAW, this is where I find it, views, piano roll. And then we'll just go down to where the kick drums are, because that's what I'm starting with. And if you're using if you're using the 2 other drum kits I told you earlier in this video that are free, you just got to figure out where all the notes are and then just kind of write them down or just kind of remember where they're at. So let's start off with putting the kick drum in. Now I want these notes are going to be 8th notes, and I want them on snap to every 8th note in the measure. So wherever I click on here, it'll just snap it to the closest 8th note. So on the first measure, I'm gonna place a kick drum on beat 1. On the and of 2, beat 3, and on the and of 4. Now the second measure is also going to be the same. So let's put those in. The end of 2, 3, and on the end of 4. All right. Now that we got that set, we're going to go ahead and add the snare. Now, when you're inputting these notes, if you look here, my velocity is always sitting at about 100. Your velocity is going to go from 0 to 127. Now, right now, we're not going to mess with that. Just make sure that all your notes are, pretty much going at 100 or, right at 100. What this is going to do is it's going to let us play with the dynamics, so it can make the drum a little bit louder or a little bit softer. And this is where the human feel is going to end up coming in. So just remember that. Just keep everything at 100. You should be fine. Now we're going to put in the snare, and we're just going to keep it in 8th notes. The snare that I'm using, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use a side stick. And what we'll do is that's going to be on beat 4. So we'll just put that on beat 4. And then on this measure, beat 4. Okay, now we have those set up. And the last thing I want to do here is I want to put in my hi-hat. Now I got 3 sounds for the hi-hat. It's open. it's got the foot close and then just being tight. Now there's a couple different other sounds on here as far as the hi-hat. You got, partially open. I think there's probably 3 different settings in there, but we're just going to use this. I'm not going to go too much in depth in this. So what I want to do is I want to create these on 16th notes. And I want to make sure that they're snapping to every 16th. So let's put those in. So what I want to do is I want to put the hi-hat on beat 1, on the and the and then on beat 2, and then it's and 3 and 4 and. Now the second measure will be the same, except at the end. So we're just going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now I'm going to place where the open hi-hat's going to be on the and of 4. And then when I get ready, I'm going to copy this measure. I'll do this real quick here for you. So what we'll do is we'll copy this and we'll put it right here. And don't do this right now, but I'm just kind of showing you what we're going to end up doing. And we'll deselect everything. And then what I want to do is I want to move this note, which would be on the first measure, up to where it's a closed hi-hat now. So if I play it, this is what it's going to sound like. So you hear that psst, and that's what I want. So, but we're not really ready for that yet. So I'm just going to delete that. Now I have my basics down, and that's what we're going to end up working with. Now comes the fun part. Here's where we're going to humanize this drum part now. We're going to play around with the velocities, like I said. And this is where the big part of, making it sound like a real drummer. What we'll do is we'll play with the velocities, and then we'll also kind of move the notes, off the beat a little bit. You won't notice it a whole lot, but it kind of adds a little bit to it. If you were to play this drum beat and play with a metronome, you'll never hit the beat. You'll never be right on. You'll be close, but you'll never be on because, you're human. And in this, it sounds too much like a robot playing. So if I play this, here's what we got. Okay, so you pretty much have everything all at one velocity. Everything's all the same. Nothing changes. It's all right on the beat. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to mess around, and we'll pretty much change some of the velocities. So let's work with the hi-hat first on, the velocities and stuff. Now this is where listening to a drummer on how they would play a pattern or talking to a drummer, this is where that's going to come in handy. Because what you want to do is a drummer will not play at the same velocity at every time. That's just not going to happen. So what we want to do is we want to create something where, you hear how a drummer would actually play. So the first note, might be hit a little bit harder because it's beat 1. And then you have where the second hit would come in. Maybe it's a little bit lower. And the second one would be kind of a little bit higher. And then maybe a little bit lower. I don't, there's no science to this. It just kind of play around with it, and you'll hear the difference. And you don't want to hear so much of a difference, but you want to hear somewhat of a difference. So if I were to play just the hi-hat part here, let me just play the hi-hat for you. Go to the mixer, and we'll just play the hi-hat. Oops. Let's get rid of those guitars for now. Okay, if we were to just play the hi-hat, this is what it sounds like. Okay, you can notice that it's just all one Okay, there's no dynamics right there. So what we want to do is we want to create some dynamics in this. And that's why we play around the velocities. Maybe the first hit's a little bit harder. And then if you were to, actually, sit there and maybe play it, with the first 2 hits, they might be a little bit softer. And then a little bit louder on the second hit. So let's hear what that's going to sound like. Okay, you can kind of hear a little bit of difference there. And then maybe the second one's not going to be so loud. Maybe the third one, and we'll just kind of play around with these a little bit, Let's see, we're in beat 1 now. Okay, so go up a little bit more. And we'll do the same thing here. Kind of get these a little bit down. Like I said, there's no science to this. There's, it's just, listening to a drummer, that's going to help you so much to figure out how these notes are going to be arranged. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit higher. All right. So now I changed all the velocities on our hi-hats, and let's listen to how this is going to sound. Okay, you can hear the dynamics now. You can hear it, it sounds like there's a real drummer playing this thing. And what we'll do is we will maybe shift these notes around a little bit. So let's move that one over a little bit. Maybe they're not right on the beat. And then, let's see here. Let's change this velocity a little bit more. Go up a little bit more. Okay. And then, I'm going to go ahead of the beat. And the other thing, too, is, don't move every single note. Just move one here and there. Kind of just play around with it. That's all you got to do. And then move that one a little bit. So what you want to do is maybe move one forward, move one back. You're going to kind of create a little bit, this and that. Oops. Okay. So now let's listen to this now. Okay, you hear a little bit of difference in there, but not a whole lot. But it sounds more human than what you were hearing before. So if I were to play the original, let's go to the original here. Here's what you got. Okay, and then we'll go back. Okay, so that sounds more human than the way we originally put it down. Now we can do this with the bass drums or with the kick drums. Let's see which one is. Oh, I gotta turn this back on here now. Oh, where is it? Turn this back down. All right, so now we got our kick drum. So normally on a kick drum, maybe your first beat is going to be hit hard, and when you get to the and 3, your kick drum on the and is not going to be as hard as if you were going to play 3. So you get that do 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 do, and then you basically play around with everything again. I mean, oh, that's the wrong one. So here, put that up a little bit. Now, as far as the snares, you can pretty much keep those pretty much the same. You might want to change it up a little bit just to, you don't want to keep it right at 100. So, if you stay between like 100 and 110 or like 100 to 90 within those ranges, you should have a decent dynamics. It should sound pretty decent that way. Just don't go too drastic. That's the one thing you don't want. Okay. Let's finish up here. Put that up a little bit more. Of course, we're going to have this last one because your kick is going to come on beat 1. And then, again, you just kind of want to go around and kind of play around with, we'll keep that one on beat 1. Maybe have this one a little bit earlier, change it off a little. This one we might have just a little early. This one might come in a little bit later. Let's push this one a little ahead of the beat. And the same thing with that. And then we'll keep that one there. All right. So here's what we got now with changing all the velocities and changing the notes off of where the beat actually is. We just changed it slightly, so there's not a huge difference, but you're going to hear somewhat of a difference. So here's what it sounds like now. So that's what you got. All right. So what I want to do is I want to copy this, and then we're going to go and we're going to place it right next to it. And then what I told you on where the open hi-hat here, I wanted that psst. And here's where I want this to be where the pedal closes. So, dang it. There it is. And maybe a little bit higher, I don't know. And then that'll be maybe, let's see, ahead of the beat maybe. Put it right there. And we'll see what that sounds like. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll just keep going through my drum tracks just like this. And like I said, I'll work in two measures every time. And then what I'll do is I'll go through the whole song like this. And I'll play it with the guitar track so you know what this is going to sound like. Okay, now when I go back and re-record the guitars, it's going to feel like I'm playing with a real drummer. By keeping it just how it was, let me see if I can bring this back in. Let's see here. Let's bring this over here so you can kind of hear what's going on. Well, let's see here. Let me create another track here. We'll bring this down here. Okay. I kind of want to show you what it's going to sound like. Oops. All right. So here's what we started with. Like I said, you can kind of hear how that sounds where it's all the same. And then here's what we ended up with. So it adds to the realism, I guess. And the thing is, I'm not an expert at this. I'm still learning myself on all this. But this is how I create my drum tracks. And like I said, I'll just go through the whole song. If I add toms and stuff like that, same thing. You just got to know, what toms are going to get hit harder than the other. And then again, you just got to pay attention to what a drummer would actually play and how they play it. So just remember all that. And then that's basically all it is. And what I'll do is I'll finish this off, and then I'll listen to it over and make sure this is how I want it done. And then we'll go on to the next step. All right, like I said earlier in the video, I was going to show you what the Steven Slate's drums kit sounds like and the MT Power drum kit sounds like. Those are the two free ones. So here is what the EZdrummer sounds like. All right. And here is the Steven Slate. And then here is the MT Power drum kit. Now, both those free kits I think do sound good. You just kind of play around with the EQ and stuff like that, and you can get it to turn out really good. So that is what those free ones sound like. All right, that wraps up for how I record drums. Now what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll listen to it a few more times just to make sure that that's how I really want it to sound. And that's pretty much it. So on the next episode, we're going to talk about how I record the bass. So stay tuned for that. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you later.